Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. The early chatters are in, and welcome.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide truth.
What's happening? I'm getting some sound from somewhere. I have no idea where. Anyways, I'm looking through the chats just a little bit. Jay Ackert, Disco Inferno, indeed.
Muted mine just in case.
Oh, I think that's what I'm hearing. Yeah. Anyways, guys, how are you doing? Excuse me. Basil, namaste. Gene, Urban Hermit. Poppy Davis says aliens are happening. I hope so. Somebody's got to come in here and shake things up a little bit. Show us what? You mean my bearskin rug, Gene? I've got bare ankles, by the way. I don't know if that makes anybody excited. Back in the day, you know, if this was the 1880s, my bare ankles might make you really excited. Anyways, guys, so I have a little bit of a surprise treat for you all. I have a special guest, Karl Alexander Pauls, who has been in the chats the last couple days as Your Environment Seattle. And we had a little bit of back and forth in the chat about eco-modernism and some other, you know, where we see the future of the climate crisis or the climate catastrophe. So what I want to do is bring Karl on, and we're just going to have a little conversation. And we're going to do a little bit of a half an hour conversation about the climate crisis, where it's at, where we think it's going, etc. It's just that's about it. It's just basically a conversation, and I hope you all enjoy this. Let me see if I can do this correctly. Let me see. I want to do it without messing everything up. That's what I want to do. Hopefully, you guys will be able to see. Karl, how you doing? Greetings. Welcome to Black Bear News.
Thanks for having me along.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, you know, you were talking about wanting to have a conversation on Skype, and I thought, like, well, why don't we just have a conversation on the show and just do it publicly, air it out in public, right?
Yeah.
So I think people will get maybe more from that than just you and I discussing, which would be totally fine with me. But anyway, so just to jump into it. Well, what is your what's your background in the environmental movement? Are you educated in environmental science, or are you just a layman who's very interested like me, or are you, you know, what's your?
I am not, not super educated beyond a normal computer science engineering background. So I had to do, physics up to sophomore level in college, and I had to do, all the chemistry just below organic chemistry, which is the nightmare one at Washington State. But I grew up in East Tennessee, so we had coal, we had acid rain, we had the whole deal with the beginning of the environmental movement. I mean, Al Gore was my senator. I volunteered for Al Gore 2000. So
got it.
I started off by default in that position, and like, well, fossil fuels are bad. They're wrecking our environment. They're literally killing birds, making their eggshells thin, and
right,
killing the next generation of birds in Tennessee. So we fixed that, and I was super happy that we had that, resolved that problem. But then I sort of, inconvenient truth, 2000s rolled around, and then the Bush years hit, and here we go, fight for oil, drill baby drill, all that stuff, and
Right.
I just totally gung-ho environmental, like 350 Spokane was my first march, what was that, 2006, something like that?
Right.
When 350.org was getting kicked off, and
Right.
planting trees and doing all sorts of stuff with different environmental organizations. And those Bush years and then the Obama, recovery was supposed to bring us back. And what changes did we get? We didn't really get a lot of progress since then. So that's where I started. And then
Right.
we should have our conversation.
Right.
That is my entry level.
Got it. Yeah. Well, yeah, my, you come from a place of being, involved in the environmental, fight, and I respect that. And I just wanted to, you said a few things the other day. You were saying that the planet could support 10 billion people. And is that correct? And I just kind of wanted to go into how you thought that could happen, or maybe what you think is the path forward as far as mitigating or fighting climate change or adapting to climate change, or where you see us in the climate crisis, where along the path.
I see some comments on my volume, so I turn myself up. Let me know if that's too much, everyone.
Okay.
So what I've got is the IPCC, 2018, October 2018, IPCC has a report. It says, hey, we think we can maintain our climate, in other words, hit 1.5 degrees, if we do this by 2030. And what this is the, limit our emissions to a certain amount, or maybe overshoot it and then claw it back with carbon sequestration.
Right.
So it's very science-based. And a little bit before that, I got really excited about thorium, and I was sort of like, wow, this is kind of crazy. I mean, I have this background where I understand nuclear because East Tennessee and Museum of Energy and all that. And I sort of went overboard on, this tech fix. This is like, oh yeah, this is gonna fix everything. I'm all for it.
Right.
But I actually got to know the nuclear community and understand it and understand the limitations.
Right.
But it's still a huge part of what's possible. We can't say that anything is possible and just like one thing's going to save us all. That's not realistic. The reality is, someone says kick my gain up a little more, so I'll kick it up a little more.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you fine over here, so
All right. The problem is, we need everything that we can possibly get, because that IPCC report said that we need to quadruple our nuclear by 2050. We need to double it by 2030.
Right.
And what we've been doing, we've been shutting it down.
Right. Well, I guess that's there. So there are a few people on the channel who regularly bring up the thorium fix or possibility. What do you think about the fact that it's actually not anything that we're using at scale right now? I mean, in the immediate.
We're not using solar or batteries at scale right now. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, but I mean,
demonstrate solar on a little bit of solar.
Right.
You can demonstrate a little bit of batteries, but
Well,
is that
any
better or worse than EBR2?
Well, maybe at scale was the wrong thing to say. I'm saying it's not being used. Period. I mean, there's not a lot of. It's not in current. Are there any reactors being built? Thorium reactors being built? I'm not aware of any that are being built at the moment.
There is. Okay, so let's talk about, not just thorium is not a magic wand. It's not a silver bullet. Let's talk about what was called 2 decades ago the fourth generation reactor.
Right.
There's categories. This fourth generation international forum was the organization, and they said, here they are. Here's 6 reactors. We think these are the ones that are going to get done.
Yeah.
And yesterday, China said, hey, we are starting our first test of a high temperature gas reactor. It's on the same site as two 1.4 gigawatt third generation reactors.
Yeah.
The ones exactly like the ones we're trying to build in Georgia right now.
Okay.
And so there's one high temperature gas reactor, and 9 more. If this thing works out, 9 more are going to get built on the same site.
Right.
And those are, they're about the electrical output of our regular nuclear reactors.
A third of the output.
Yeah, because they're smaller. You
Yeah.
don't want to have any kind of uncontrolled explosion. So they're high temperature, high.
Right. Well, that's what I was reading about them, was that they're prone. If something goes wrong, it can go very wrong. Right. It's very volatile, the process.
That's the problem with traditional nuclear is you have a huge amount of water under pressure, and a loss of that pressure results in steam.
Right.
Every great nuclear disaster has been steam, water at high temperatures flashing into steam. That was Chernobyl, had a prompt criticality that cracked the reactor open just enough to let the steam out. And that steam explosion was the primary reaction.
Okay.
And Fukushima was actually, that one was hydrogen. Whoops.
Right. But it was a different things going on there, for sure.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, a high temperature gas reactor. Maybe we'll pick something better than steam, than water. And the idea is that it's smaller. It has less expansive force because it's high temperature gas, not a pressurized water.
Right.
And so it'll have different characteristics, and that's the whole point of the fourth generation. Is you pick all these things that are different characteristics, and you iterate on it and prove it out, and then maybe we get the political acceptance that follows that. Hopefully, but what if we just accepted that nuclear was not as scary as we thought it was? Is that an alternative?
I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty fundamental question, I think, to ask about, the fourth generation or third generation or whatever we are using. Like, what is so right now, most of the reactors that are in use need water to be cooled, right? And because of the escalating climate crisis, a lot of those reactors are in jeopardy, right? Are starting to reach, there's reactors in France that are being closed down because the water that they're being cooled with is getting too warm. There was a reactor in Omaha that was very close to being flooded due to a flood situation, I think last year, right? So
okay, so now we got 2 things. Let's take them one at a time. The first was reactors in France shutting down. They're on the river.
Right.
The temperature of the river can't go too high or it'll kill the fish.
Right.
And so they had a temperature, like, let's say 28 degrees Celsius. They're not allowed to go above 28 degrees Celsius or you're going to kill the fish. And so what happens when the natural temperature of that water is 28 degrees Celsius?
Right.
They say, okay, well, you can have a 0.1 degree threshold then. As long as, if the water's naturally that hot, you're allowed to put in just a little bit of temperature variation.
Right. But
and so that's why they have to reduce their output in that case.
Right.
it's not that the reactor is going to go up because we're 120. We're not going to blow up a reactor because we're 35 degrees Celsius. It's the environmental impacts.
Right, but I mean, right, there are environmental impacts, and there's multiple ways that the environment can impact the running of a nuclear, and then that creates a situation where the cost of running nuclear power becomes way more than the benefit, right? So
What's the social cost of carbon?
yeah, but I mean, like you're kind of replacing one evil with the other, aren't you?
How evil? No.
Well, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that's the question is, how evil is carbon? How much? Like, what do you put? $5 a ton? That's a cheap price. That's less than 4 cents a gallon of gas. And I fought for that. I've got a poster around here somewhere that was the our carbon tax in Washington got defeated. I put hundreds of hours into that thing, and we couldn't even stomach a $15 a ton carbon tax.
right. Well, I mean, I don't, just on a personal level, I don't know if replacing, we could even slide this into the debate around whether renewables are going to put us on a as far as like solar and wind, whether that's going to put us on an acceptable path towards, mitigating climate change to in a way that will allow us to survive, right? So, I assume that you watched the movie Planet of the Humans, or maybe.
Yeah, I had a little. I had a video question I tried to get more to answer, and they didn't even get to the subject. And that question is, what does the science say? I understand that you've got to look at the moral hazard of whatever you're doing, but there's some point where that moral hazard idea becomes reactionary. The fact of having, what is it, 6 or 7 billion people on Earth, and your solution is, well, we just can't give them the energy that they need to have the lifestyle that we do, right? Is that the question? Is that either the West needs to shed
Yes.
80% of their energy use,
Right.
or we need to make that energy use cleaner.
Right. Well, I mean, again, on my personal opinion is that the West needs to shed 80% of their energy use, or that instead of, we're right now historically the economic growth model, or the way that things are advancing, is that the West exports its standard of living, or its way of living, or its lifestyle, consumer lifestyle, to the rest of the world, which is totally backwards, which is actually what's causing climate change, or not climate change. It is causing climate change, but climate destruction, because the consumerism that we're foisting upon the rest of the world, and the demand for cars and energy and washing machines and clothes, and like all of that is part of the equation of the destruction of the planet, right? So, in my mind, the thing to do would be to reverse that, which is import lifestyles that we call poor, or indigenous lifestyles that we call, whatever it is we want to give the name to it, right? We might call it subsistence farming, or, right? Like in my mind, the way to mitigate climate change is for us to adopt those practices and go. And yes, it would, in a lot of people's minds, would look like, well, we're going backwards, or whatever. But
And so I guess the question is that should you and I, men of our age, should we live? Because there's a point at which, in a subsistence farming economy, we're dead. Like men of 40, 45, 50 are not going to survive very
Well,
long.
why so? Why do you say that?
Well, the medical care, uh, intense labor,
Right.
air pollution from cooking fuels, all of these things, drastically shorten lifespans.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I, it's one of those. It starts to get really existential, right? And there's a thing that I talk about a lot on my channel, which is the idea of humanism, or right,
Right.
the thing that humans engage in, which is, just a kind of a knee jerk thing that we all do. It's like whatever is good for humans is good for humans. It doesn't, the nature be damned or the environment be damned, or like whatever the wholesale consequence of what it is we're doing with ourselves
Right.
is not a factor. So, that's one of those things. It's like, there's a man in England, I think his last name is Gupta, who is an environmental activist, and he says, he said a couple of times, he's like, why is destroying the planet worth adding, 15 extra years to our lives? Like, what are we getting out of those extra 15 years?
That's a pretty profound question.
It is, and
That's where all the wealth in the world exists, right? Like 2/3 of the wealth is, people over the age of 60.
Right.
So
right.
we'll solve capitalism and the environment all in one chop.
Right. Well, I mean, definitely trying to sell a low carbon footprint subsistence farming lifestyle to to the very wealthy is going to be,
Yeah.
it's going to be a tough one.
YouTube, by the way.
Huh?
Everyone out there.
Okay.
We're going to use the internet to evangelize our subsistence lifestyle.
Exactly. Well, and that is, I think that's also another possible, very, very debatable question about how to go forward is like, what, if we were going to eliminate, a lot of our lifestyles that encourage destroying the planet, like what are we eliminating? Are something are right, but I mean, are something what's right, but like what's important is obviously people would probably say like medical care. I'm just saying the things that people would obviously but then you start adding things onto that, right? Like, well, we need the internet. Well, we need this. We need heating, air conditioning. We need all the right? And then all of a sudden you've got like all the things that everybody has anyways, right?
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at you've probably done a little bit of this, your personal energy budget, and I have done my darndest to not run the AC this summer, and that is far easier for me than it is for you. You're in LA, I guess, and you've got 10, 15 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than I do here in Seattle. I think we hit 85 to 93.
I was gonna say it's getting harder to do in Seattle, like because
it is.
You have many more 80 and 90 degree days than you used to, right? Like 10 years ago.
Yeah. And we can't force people who live in, let's say, India. They have methods, like they'll wet a blanket and they'll hang it in the window and the wind will waft in the evening, and they'll make it maybe barely bearable.
Right.
That's about the best they can do. And so what's the question? The highest energy intensive appliances we have are a dishwasher, a clothes dryer, an air conditioner.
Right.
Eliminate those three things, and we haven't even gone through a third of the average American's energy consumption.
Right.
We're to what I would call the Eco-Modernist Lifestyle. Urban living in Shenzhen no dishwasher. You just have this. You clean the dishes up by hand and put them in a UV sterilizing drawer. You know, they don't even have running water. They get bottled water all the time. They wash their clothes in the laundromat and then take them back wet and hang them up, or maybe they have a small clothes washer and they can hang dry their clothes.
Why is it that they are doing this, or why are they living like this? Is this from a government mandate, or is this something the city decided to do, or the people of the Shenzhen side that's just how they live?
Yeah, it's just expensive, and this is, you know, this is bearable and affordable, and it became the norm. I don't know if it's cultural or just a function of economics, but you know, I follow ADV China, a great YouTube channel for looking at what the actual lifestyles of urban Chinese living is.
Huh. I don't know. I'll have to look into it because I'm not really familiar with it. So I can't speak on it really at any length, or how I feel about it, you know, but it sounds interesting. I think that there are a lot of different ways that people live around the world, and, you know, different cultures that we could probably learn from, you know, in the West. But I still feel that, you know, just for me, and something that I talk about on my channel all the time, is that, you know, our probable best bet is to have ultra regional, local, you know, commerce, right? Like, and agriculture, you know, something along the lines of maybe not subsistence farming, but more agriculturally, you know, kind of like the Amish with a little bit with some techno gadgets. So like, you know, the Amish with the internet. So if the Amish had the internet, then like you could have a high information society. You could have community, you know, not the internet that we know now, not the internet that's being censored and, you know, kind of corralled into this, you know, hyper, like, oh, I don't know what it is, but, you know, hyper propagandist, you know, kind of thing that's happening right now on the internet. But like, you know, if people had the internet and they could have, you know, access to information and communication, but then that's about it, right? No cars, no airplanes, no, you know, or maybe the only transportation is, you know, like very local electric, you know, buses or something, or whatever. But
Or electric bikes.
Or electric, yeah, even better.
Yeah.
Right.
20 miles each way today to get to a friend's house to do something. So it's
Right.
really great. This sounds like an eco-modern. You know, this doesn't sound like a primitivist lifestyle to me. This sounds more eco-modern. Maybe if you have far less transportation fuel needs because you have whatever things. Let's say we can't defeat capitalism. I mean, I'd love to. That'd solve a lot of problems. But if we can't,
Sure.
Or if we still have these vestigial needs or wants, like plastic action figures, then you get those printed at the UPS store or something instead of freaking carted in on a bunker fuel burning steamer from China.
Right. Or you know, or people can just craft, you know, the things that they, you know, I mean, I don't know. There are so many different ways that we could, right. You know, there are different ways that we can satisfy like the boredom condition, which I think is like also a very big component of the human problem, is that, you know, we just are bored. We get bored. We don't want to, you know, like farming is actually pretty great, but it's also boring, right? So people are like, what else do we do? You know, like this farming stuff is okay, but how about building some airplanes and some tanks, and let's have a war, because that's, you know, interesting. I don't know. It's just I think there's an element to humans that, like, we're, you know, kind of children that like to mess things up as much as we like to build them. But
and that's more, I think, from the corruption of the political system we're in than from human nature. And it is that struggle, that universal struggle that we're all facing these days, especially, of people in power for some reason are addicted to power and they want more power.
Right. Right. Or, or just whether power corrupts or the corrupt are drawn to power, that just seems to be, it seems to mirror the worst in us or the worst in society or whatever. But totally, I agree with that. But I don't know how you get rid of that power structure at the moment. I'm not really sure what the answer to that is, but
that's one of the struggles that I'm learning more about, and I hope to bring more people along to the cause.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, for sure.
I'll give a quick shout out to ranked choice voting.
Oh yeah.
When I want to talk about political systems, propaganda, and what we call a controlled opposition.
Oh sure.
Republicans and Democrats make fun of each other and say, "Oh, they're the worst thing in the world," and no, they are. And that's this controlled opposition where you only have the shit sandwich and the giant douche, and those are your
right.
two options.
Oh yeah, I totally concur. I mean, I don't know. As long as people keep buying into that paradigm, right? There's no way to. As long as people are like blue, no matter who, right? Like, you're a very bad person if you vote green, or you're, whatever.
Uh-oh. I'm seeing you're dropping frames.
Hold on.
Let me go get something for the audience, though.
Okay. Give me one. Yeah, I'll go check it out.
Do you want to cover any questions? I see some things out there.
Yeah, I'm looking at. Hold on. Let's do a very quick question thing because I do want to I want to cover a couple of articles today. So I want to wrap up our conversation, but let me. Valhalla says, "I want to know why Karl thinks 10 billion people on Earth is a good thing."
I think not being an eco-fascist and killing people indiscriminately is a bad thing. I think that 10 billion is the worst case. We should do everything possible to help people uplift themselves and their communities to eliminate global poverty. And eliminating global poverty is the best way to reduce the overall population of the Earth as fast as possible. We can do one child per family thing like China. We can try to force a population reduction. We could straight out, nuclear war. That's going to kill people. Yeah. That sounds morally abhorrent. And I think that the best we can do is encourage people. That's the moral thing to do, is provide them the tools, the family planning, the career opportunities, emancipation for women, emancipation for the impoverished. That's going to fix the population boom.
Well, I think that's when you said eco-fascist, like when I think that was part of the backlash to Michael Moore's movie was that people were calling him they were saying eco-fascist. They just said that population was a problem. They didn't say like we want to kill people. And I feel like that's a really like but that's
if that's the problem, what's the solution?
Right. No, but the thing is you just laid out the solution. The solution is that people need to realize that population is a problem, and then act accordingly, not kill people. Like, and I feel like that's, it's kind of when people say the word overpopulation, there's a knee jerk like, oh my God, eugenics, like, people recognizing that overpopulation is a problem is not a problem. That's a fact. That's just like, overpopulation is not a good thing for the planet, and it's not a good thing for, I think for people's quality of living overall, because if there were, and there, we could go on and on. There are like many roads to go down in the population discussion, but I think that just recognizing it is not, agreeing with ecofascism or saying you want to Thanos people, like out of the planet. I find, and it's interesting that movie came out when it did, right? Because climate change is progressing, and because they want, like on some level that was like a little bit of predictive programming, right? Like people are going to start talking about overpopulation or climate change, etc., and we're going to create this Thanos character who wants to kill half the universe, to mitigate the impacts of climate. Hey guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and you can support the channel at the links below, PayPal, Patreon, Square. Also, if you'd like to watch the live streams, you can watch the live streams on my Patreon channel. You can subscribe for as little as $1. So hopefully I will see you over there, and thanks so much.